of Antwerp, and we are really next door to the River Scheldt, has merged with the Port of Zeebrugge about 1 year ago. That's why we are now called the Port of Antwerp Bruges. And it's a major port, it's a major gateway, and that brings me to the first function of our port, which is port handling, which is loading and unloading vessels, reloading cargo onto trucks, wagons, or transport the goods through pipelines to the European hinterland. We are doing about 290 million tons, makes us number 2 in Europe, top 20 in the world, so a major point. But there is much more. The Port of Antwerp is much more than a port. It's built on 2 other pillars at the same time. The second pillar is this huge integrated chemical complex. So the chemical industry is hosted, accommodated inside the port. Makes us a bit different from other ports. Many ports have chemical clusters, but they are usually 50, 100 kilometers or even further away. Here it's a fully integrated model. And that's what I also mean with cluster. The power of cluster had different dimensions. One of them is that within this chemical cluster there is a high level of integration. Companies producing molecule A are delivering that to company B. So the relationship between them makes the cluster stronger, and it's one of our strategic axes to look for investors that produce molecules which are strengthening the cluster here in Antwerp. And the third pillar we are built upon is the logistics sector. We host a tremendous big amount of warehouse capability, but also value-added logistics services. And that's another cluster effect I want to pinpoint. Different chemical companies have decided a few years ago to concentrate, to focus on the production of the molecules or the products they make, and to give all the logistic functions, the packaging in whatever form, distribution, transport overseas or to the European hinterland, to logistic players. So also there, a very strong clustering effect between this port handling, the industry, and that logistic feed. But also clustering between clusters is so important. And we will have a speaker later on, Jürgen from WF, who will be talking about, for sure, I hope, about the project of transitioning industrial clusters towards net zero, which is a collaboration and exchange of know-how on the level of the clusters itself, between the clusters all over the world, but particularly also here in Europe. And the power of cluster, so for me, relates to deepening possibility of know-how within the cluster or between the clusters, having more impact, and which we do have as this massive, robust cluster, and as a clustering effect, do co-creation and innovation. So we have a setup, a context that allows companies to grow and that allows companies to innovate and co-create. Brings me to the role that we have as Port of Antwerp Bruges as an authority. We want to be the lever for a sustainable future of the companies operating on the platform, but also in the hinterland and the clusters in the hinterland. We have 4 roles, basically. I'm not going to detail, but from the old times, of course, we are also a regulator. We have a police function. We are an operator. We are taking care of the nautical chain, for instance, to make sure that the whole logistic flow can work fluidly. We are the landlord, but we have become more and more the proactive landlord, and the 4th function is the community builder, whereby we, as Port Authority, bring together parties, private and public, to work on tangible projects. And we have a few examples a bit later on the green transition, where we do work together and we play this role of lever. Lever for sustainable future. Sustainability also means, and especially in our sector, that of course the security of energy and feedstock supply is key. We as Port Authority, just an example, already many years ago, started investing in green electricity. The Port of Antwerp, Bruges, hosts the largest onshore wind farm. But also on the feedstock supply, we are now working very hard together with the private sector to make sure that we will have the green molecules available for the industry of tomorrow as feedstock. And of course, we want to comply in full to the EU Green Deal, climate neutral by 2050. And we even want to be a front runner in this transition towards a circular and low carbon economy. Here you see a big liquid bulk ship transporting the molecules of today, but of course capable also to transport the green molecules of tomorrow that we will need to decarbonize or low carbonize the raw materials used in the industry in Europe. And on the back you see the windmills, so the green electricity in the port. The scale of the cluster and the synergies that I've been talking about has made us very efficient and very robust. So it is a very strong base we have here as industrial complex in the port, but we are really concerned about the competitivity of our cluster. We all know that the European industry, and especially the chemical industry, and I'm sure Jan will go in much more detail afterwards, is going through rough times. We are confronted with high energy prices on the one hand and increasing prices for raw materials. The Ukraine-Russian war is, of course, an important element in this, resulting in this increase of prices. But also, the complex EU regulations, for instance, in the context of climate change, is not making the situation easier. Don't misunderstand me, we absolutely need this climate policy of the EU. That's the future. If we don't do that, we will be dead. So no doubt about that, but we do see that we are threatened on international level in terms of competitivity with China and the United States. And it's something that we can see in the flows itself. We see the massive financial support that, for instance, the US companies get from the IRA, which is a very simple system to obtain funds. I simplify perhaps too much, but you can ask online for a support, for instance, for a green project in the United States. In Europe, it's a very complex matter. We also make money available here in Europe, but the regulation is fragmented, it's very complex, so it's not always encouraging, and some companies are not even able to realize their files to come to the financing aspect. So we see massive support, massive financial support to the US industry. In China, the situation is still different, but also there is strong financial support. We have seen it, for instance, in the way China took over the solar panel market, through financial support, of course. And if you look on the flows coming into our port, we already see that feedstock, which we used to produce ourselves and export, are now being imported. So there is a clear impact of this international competitive change on the cluster here in Antwerp. But okay, we want to stay positive. The only way forward is forward. We cannot afford to lose our industry. I think all of us are convinced of that. And we also feel on the discussions with the political level, on national and EU level, that the willingness to perhaps rethink some of the processes, rethink some of the legislation is present as we are collectively losing market. So we as Port of Antwerp Bruges are fully supporting this. We are using our power, our impact as cluster to help realize this, let's call it turnaround. We can't do it on our own. It's an obvious thing, but it's also something we try to do in a tangible way here in the Port of Antwerp Bruges. On the picture you see a project of heat recuperation. So heat, form of steam, is transported through these pipelines from the industrial plant of Indaver, it's an incineration plant, to the maltery of Boortmalt, biggest maltery in the world. It's a project done with different partners, just mentioned the names. It's the city, it's the port, Fluvius, Woonhaven, the Flemish administration, and of course Indaver and Boortmalt. It's a project we can only realize together, and together with partners that are engaged. We learned a lot from partnerships over the last years. We started some partnerships with a coalition of the willing, but that's not enough. You need a coalition of the engaged. And now the projects we are doing are really engaged companies. We are very proud about that we have been able to create this collaborative model. And a few other examples are, for instance, the Hydrogen Import Coalition, where the port, Engie, DEME, Exmar, Fluxys and Waterstofnet are working together to study production overseas of green molecules, green hydrogen and its carriers, green ammonia, green methanol, to bring it to the port of Zeebrugge and then to the port of Antwerp industry and further on to the industry in Germany and beyond. So it's a project with a few partners that collectively have a target, willing to put the means on the table to realize that. And another one is Antwerp at Sea, and I'm sure Jan will talk about that. It's a CCUS project, again, with different partners, different industrial players here on the scene, BASF, Total, what do I see here? Fluxys, INEOS, ExxonMobil, Borealis. Again, partners sitting together, bringing means, know-how, and willingness together to realize such a CCUS contract, CCUS project. We as Port of Antwerp Bruges will continue supporting these developments. We want to be the one that ignites these projects if needed, if the private sector is taking it up itself. Good for us as well, but we want to proceed together the way forward. Also in cross-border cooperations, we're playing a role. We are working together with overseas sport, building things like the green corridors, helping this cluster to remain strong and have a future for this industry. So together we believe in it, but the circumstances are sometimes very difficult. I thank you very much.